My name is Lauren Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, my older brother stood up at our grandmother's 80th birthday dinner, raised his glass in a toast to family loyalty, and then spent the next 10 minutes systematically convincing every person in that room that I was a bitter, jealous failure who didn't deserve to call myself a Mitchell. The worst part? Half of them nodded along. My mother reached for her wine and didn't say a word. My father actually chuckled at one of the jokes, the one about me being the family's professional spectator. They thought they had won something that night. They thought the silence I gave them was weakness. But here's what none of them knew when they walked into that restaurant. I had a manila envelope in my car that would burn their entire plan to the ground before the coffee was served. And my grandmother, the woman they'd spent months trying to manipulate into signing away her legacy, had been in on it with me the whole time. Stay with me, because the dinner was just where the fuse got lit. Before I take you back to where this all started, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the person in your family who quietly fixes everything while everyone else takes credit for standing still? The one who shows up early, stays late, pays the bills nobody mentions, and somehow still gets introduced as the other one? If you've ever felt like the invisible scaffold holding up a house that's about to fall on you, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Because this story is for every quiet person who finally stopped swallowing the silence. I need to explain what I do for a living because it matters later. I'm a structural engineer for the city of Franklin. I inspect bridges, tunnels, overpasses, the boring, heavy things that everyone takes for granted until they collapse. I write reports about load tolerances and concrete fatigue. I measure cracks in beams that are holding up thousands of tons of steel and asphalt and human life. It's not glamorous work. Nobody throws a parade for the engineer who caught the hairline fracture before the interstate fell into the river. But I'm good at it. I'm good at seeing what other people miss, the small weakness hidden inside something that looks solid on the outside. That skill turned out to be useful in ways my family never expected. 3 years ago, I moved into a small bungalow on Cedar Street, 20 minutes from my parents' place in the Franklin suburbs. Close enough to be useful, far enough to breathe. My grandmother, Eleanor, lived 10 minutes in the other direction, in the old farmhouse where my grandfather had started Mitchell Construction back in 1972. That farmhouse meant everything to her. So did the business, a small contracting company that my grandfather had built from a single pickup truck into a regional name. He died 5 years ago, and Eleanor had been running the company since, with help from my father, Richard, and my older brother, Derek. Or so everyone thought. Here's the secret I'd been keeping for almost 2 years. The company wasn't running itself. Richard didn't know how to manage payroll. Derek didn't know how to bid a job. The books had been bleeding red for 18 months, and the only reason Mitchell Construction hadn't gone under was because I'd been quietly filling the holes with my own money and my own labor. I'd rewritten their safety protocols after an OSHA violation that would have shut them down. I'd renegotiated their supplier contracts when Derek forgot to pay the hardware store for 6 months. I'd covered a $12,000 insurance lapse out of my savings account twice and never said a word. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because Eleanor was the only person in my family who'd ever looked at me like I mattered. She'd taught me to read blueprints when I was 12. She'd bought me my first calculator, the big one with the paper roll, and she'd said, "Numbers don't lie, Lauren. People do. Learn the numbers and you'll always know where the truth is." So I learned the numbers. And the numbers told me that Mitchell Construction was a beautiful facade covering a rotting foundation. And the only thing holding it up was an 80-year-old woman who still came to the office every day because she was too stubborn to let her husband's legacy die. Derek, meanwhile, was driving a new truck every year and posting vacation photos from Cabo. Richard was playing golf 3 afternoons a week and telling anyone who'd listen that he was the one keeping the business alive. I didn't confront them. I didn't ask for recognition. I just did the work and kept the receipts in a filing cabinet in my home office, labeled Mitchell Records in plain black marker. That filing cabinet would become important later. The trouble started, as trouble often does, with a piece of mail. I was at Eleanor's farmhouse on a Tuesday evening, helping her go through the stack of business correspondence she still insisted on handling herself. Her eyes weren't what they used to be, macular degeneration, slow but steady, so I'd gotten into the habit of reading things aloud and letting her dictate responses. That night, I opened a letter from a commercial real estate firm called Ashford Group, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a solicitation. It was a letter of intent, a preliminary offer to purchase the farmhouse property and the adjacent 5 acres where Mitchell Construction's workshop and equipment yard sat. The offer was generous. More than generous. It was the kind of number that made your eyes water and your brain start calculating exactly how much someone must want that land to offer that much money. I read it 3 times before I looked up at Eleanor. She was watching me with those pale blue eyes that missed nothing, even through the cloud of age. "Read it out loud, sweetheart." I did. My voice sounded strange in my ears, too flat, too controlled. When I finished, Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and patted my hand. "I've been getting those for 2 years," she said. "Different companies, different offers. I throw them away." I asked her if she'd told Richard or Derek about them. "No," she said. "And you won't either." I didn't understand then, but I would. 3 weeks later, I showed up at the farmhouse earlier than expected. Eleanor had asked me to look at a crack in the basement foundation, something that had been getting worse since the spring rains. I pulled into the gravel driveway at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, earlier than anyone else would be there. That's when I saw Derek's truck. He was parked around the side of the workshop, the spot he used when he didn't want to be obvious. I could see him through the window of the office, the small room off the main shop floor where Eleanor kept the business files. He was on the phone, pacing back and forth, one hand pressed to his forehead the way he did when he was stressed. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the window was cracked open, and the morning was quiet, and I heard enough. "Look, I need a timeline," Derek was saying, his voice tight. "She's 80 years old. She can't hold on forever. The estate will trigger the sale automatically if we position it right, but I need to know a pause." No, Richard doesn't know. He's useless. He thinks the company is worth something. I'm not waiting for him to figure out it's a corpse. Another pause. "Fine. 60 days. I'll have the paperwork ready. Just make sure the offer stays on the table." He hung up. I was already moving, stepping back behind the workshop where he couldn't see me. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't confront him. I didn't march into that office and demand an explanation. I did what I always did. I measured. I waited. And I started digging. The digging took me 2 weeks. I started with the public records. The farmhouse property, 5 acres, plus the workshop buildings, was held in a trust. Eleanor was the sole trustee. The trust specified that upon her death, the property would pass to her descendants equally, Richard, Derek, and me, 1/3 each. But there was a clause that Derek had apparently discovered, something about majority vote for property sale. If 2 of the 3 beneficiaries agreed to sell, the 3rd could be forced into compliance. Derek only needed 1 other person to say yes. And Richard, desperate for money and too proud to admit the business was failing, would say yes to anything that promised a quick payout. I found the proof in the county recorder's office. 3 months earlier, someone had filed a preliminary title search on the property. The request came from an attorney representing Ashford Group. The attorney's name was on the form. I wrote it down. Then I went to the bank. This was harder. I'm not authorized on the business accounts. But Eleanor had given me power of attorney for financial matters 2 years ago after a scare with her heart. I'd never used it. Now I did. The teller at the Franklin Savings Bank knew me. I'd been coming in with Eleanor for years. She didn't ask questions when I asked for the account statements for the past 12 months. I sat in my car in the parking lot and read them. Mitchell Construction's operating account was overdrawn by almost $8,000. There was a line of credit maxed out at $40,000. And there were 5 transfers, each for $5,000, made to a personal account in Derek's name, all in the past 6 months. The memo line on each transfer read the same way: consulting fees. Derek was a project manager. He didn't consult on anything. He was bleeding the company dry, slowly enough that the monthly losses looked like ordinary business expenses, and he was doing it while Eleanor still thought he was helping. I printed everything. I made 2 copies, one for the filing cabinet, one for the envelope I was starting to assemble. And I sat in my car for a long time, watching the sun move across the windshield, trying to decide what to do next. I didn't tell Eleanor right away. I couldn't. She was 80 years old, and her heart was fragile, and I was terrified that the shock of what I'd found would kill her. So I did something else. I called the attorney whose name was on the title search. His name was Marcus Webb, and he worked for a firm in the city, big offices, corporate clients, the kind of lawyers who didn't return calls from people like me. But I didn't call as Lauren Mitchell, the invisible daughter. I called as the power of attorney for Eleanor Mitchell, trustee of the Mitchell Family Trust. And I asked a simple question: what is your client's interest in the property at 1721 River Road? Marcus Webb was good at his job. He didn't answer directly. He asked who I was, how I got his number, what my relationship was to the property. I answered every question with a question until he finally said, "Ms. Mitchell, your brother has represented to us that he has authority to negotiate on behalf of the trust." I asked what exactly Derek had told them. He provided documentation indicating that the current trustee is incapacitated and that the beneficiaries have voted to authorize a sale. We were told the paperwork was being finalized. My hand was shaking, but my voice wasn't. "There's been a misunderstanding," I said. "The trustee isn't incapacitated. No vote has been held. And I'm the power of attorney. Any sale would require my signature." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus Webb said, "I'll have my client review our position and get back to you." He never called back. But 3 days later, Derek showed up at my front door. It was raining. Derek didn't bother with an umbrella. He stood on my porch, water dripping off his jacket, and he didn't look angry. He looked scared. "Lauren," he said, "we need to talk." I stepped aside and let him in. I didn't offer him coffee. I didn't ask him to sit. I just stood in my living room with my arms crossed and waited. He paced for a minute. Then he stopped and looked at me. "Webb called me. He said someone claiming to be your grandmother's representative told him the trust wasn't authorized to sell. That was you." I didn't deny it. "What do you want, Lauren? Money? A bigger share? Just name it. We can work something out." I almost laughed. "Almost. I want you to tell me the truth, Derek. About the company. About the money you've been taking. About why you're trying to sell property that isn't yours to sell." He stared at me for a long moment. Then his face changed, the fear hardening into something uglier. "You think you're so smart," he said quietly. "You think you're the only one who sees things. But you're nothing, Lauren. You're the one who sits in the corner and takes notes, while everyone else actually lives their lives. You don't have a husband. You don't have kids. You don't have anything except that little house and that boring job and the pathetic need to feel important." I let him talk. "Grandma is dying. You know it. I know it. The company is dying. The farm is a money pit. Ashford is offering 7 figures for that land. 7 figures. Do you understand what that means? That's retirement for Mom and Dad. That's college for Derek Jr. That's a future." He stepped closer. "And you're going to throw all of that away because you want to be loyal to a woman who won't even remember your name in 2 years? I didn't flinch. "Get out of my house, Derek." The invitation came from my mother, Patricia, 2 weeks later. Eleanor's 80th, the text said. Sunday at 6 p.m., the Franklin room. No gifts. Just family. I RSVP'd yes. So did Derek. So did Richard and Patricia and my Aunt Susan and a handful of cousins and two of my grandmother's old friends from the bridge club. I knew what they were planning. Not the specifics, but the shape of it. A big dinner, lots of wine, a warm audience. And at some point between the salad and the cake, Derek or Richard would have a conversation with Eleanor about the future. They'd frame the sale as a kindness. They'd talk about her legacy and her comfort and her desire to simplify. They'd use the word legacy at least 6 times. I'd bet money on it. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully. Black pants, a blue sweater, my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd given me for my 30th birthday. I put the manila envelope in my leather tote and I drove to the Franklin room with my hands steady on the wheel. The restaurant was nice. Too nice for a family dinner, honestly, white tablecloths, candles, a private room in the back with a long table and a view of the garden. My mother had gone all out. There were flowers on every table. A cake in the corner with sparkler candles. A champagne bucket. Eleanor was already there when I arrived. Seated at the head of the table in a wheelchair, she'd stopped using her cane 6 months ago, with a blanket over her lap and her white hair pinned up in the twist she'd worn my whole life. She saw me walk in and her face lit up. Lauren, come here, sweetheart. I leaned down and kissed her cheek. Her skin was thin and papery, but her grip on my hand was surprisingly strong. Did you bring it? She whispered. I nodded. She smiled. Good. Then let's have a party. Dinner was fine. Polite. Strained in the way family dinners are strained when everyone is pretending not to notice the elephant in the room. Derek was charming. Richard was expansive. My mother kept refilling glasses and laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Eleanor ate slowly, deliberately, watching everything with those pale blue eyes. The cake came out around 8 p.m. Sparklers lit. We sang Happy Birthday. Eleanor blew out the candles in one breath, and everyone clapped. Then Richard stood up, glass in hand, and cleared his throat. I'd like to say a few words, he announced. About family. About legacy. About what it means to carry the Mitchell name. I felt the envelope in my bag like a weight. Your grandmother has given us everything, Richard continued. This business. This name. This land. And now it's time for us to think about what we owe her in return. Comfort. Security. The freedom to rest. He turned to Eleanor. Mom, we've been talking, Derek and I, about a way to make sure you never have to worry about anything again. A way to honor Dad's memory by securing the future for all of us. Derek stood up too. They'd rehearsed this. A 2-man performance. There's a company interested in buying the farm property, Derek said. The workshop, the land, everything. They're offering a number that would set this family up for generations. No more worrying about property taxes. No more maintenance costs. No more stress. He looked around the table, making eye contact with everyone except me. We've got the paperwork ready. We just need Grandma to sign. And we thought tonight, with everyone here to witness it, would be the perfect time. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. A thick one. Legal pages, stapled together, with sticky notes marking where the signatures went. He walked over to Eleanor and laid it in front of her. Just here, Grandma, he said gently. Right on the line. The room went quiet. Everyone was watching Eleanor. Waiting. She looked down at the document. Then she looked up at Derek. Then she looked across the table at me. Lauren, she said. Do you have something for me? I stood up. I pulled the manila envelope out of my bag. I walked around the table, past my mother's frozen smile, past Richard's confused frown, past Derek's suddenly wary eyes. I set the envelope on the table in front of Eleanor. This came in the mail, I said. I thought you'd want to see it before you signed anything. Eleanor opened the envelope. She pulled out the stack of papers inside, the bank statements, the transfer records, the title search request, the letter of intent from Ashford Group. She read them slowly, page by page, while the room held its breath. When she finished, she looked up at Derek. "Consulting fees," she said. Derek's face had gone white. "Grandma, that's not, I can explain. 5 transfers. $25,000. From the company account to your personal account, while the operating account was overdrawn." Richard's head snapped toward Derek. "What?" "She's lying," Derek said quickly. "She's been trying to undermine me for years. She's jealous. She's always been jealous." Eleanor held up the bank statements. "These have the bank's stamp on them, Derek. They're not Lauren's opinion. They're numbers." My mother made a small sound, a gasp, a sob, something in between. Eleanor turned to Richard. "Did you know about the Ashford offer?" Richard's mouth opened and closed. Derek said it was a good deal. He said you'd agree. He said what?" Eleanor's voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. "He said I was incapacitated? He said the trust had voted? He said Lauren was irrelevant." Derek was backing away from the table now. "This is insane. This is family business. We shouldn't be doing this in front of everyone." "No," Eleanor said. "We shouldn't. But you're the one who brought the paperwork to my birthday dinner. You're the one who thought a room full of witnesses would pressure me into signing something I didn't understand." She set the documents down and folded her hands on top of them. "So, let's use those witnesses. Let's be clear about what's happening here." She looked around the table, at my mother, at my aunt, at the cousins, at the bridge club friends who'd come to celebrate an old woman's birthday and were now watching a family tear itself apart. "Mitchell Construction is not for sale," Eleanor said. "The farm is not for sale. And Derek is no longer authorized to act on behalf of the company or the trust." Derek laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You can't do that. I'm a beneficiary. I have rights." "You have the rights the trust gives you," Eleanor said. "And as of tonight, I'm exercising my authority as trustee to amend the distribution of responsibilities." She reached into the envelope and pulled out one more document. This one was on legal letterhead, signed and notarized, dated 3 weeks earlier. "I've already signed over power of attorney to Lauren," Eleanor said. "Full authority. Business and personal. Any decision about the property, the company, or the trust requires her approval. Not yours. Not Richard's. Hers." The room turned to look at me. Derek's face cycled through 3 expressions in rapid succession: disbelief, fury, and then, worst of all, fear. "You can't be serious," he said. "She's nobody. She's the only one who showed up," Eleanor interrupted. "For 2 years, while you were driving new trucks and posting vacation photos, Lauren was paying the insurance premiums. While you were playing golf, she was renegotiating supplier contracts. While you were planning how to sell my land out from under me, she was measuring the cracks in my foundation and figuring out how to fix them." She reached out and took my hand. "Your grandfather always said that a Mitchell is someone who builds, not someone who inherits, not someone who sells, someone who builds." She looked at Derek. "You've forgotten that. Lauren never did." The dinner ended quietly after that. People found excuses to leave. My mother cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. Richard sat at the table, staring at his plate, saying nothing. Derek walked out without saying goodbye. Eleanor stayed until the end. She ate her cake. She thanked the waitstaff. She let me push her wheelchair out to my car and help her into the passenger seat. On the drive home, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm sorry you had to be the one to carry this." I shook my head. "I'm not." She looked at me. "I'm not sorry," I said. "I'm glad it was me, because I was the only one who saw it coming." The weeks that followed were hard. Derek lawyered up, tried to challenge the power of attorney, made a lot of noise about elder abuse and undue influence. But the documents were solid. The bank statements were clear. And Marcus Webb, once he realized Derek had misrepresented his authority, withdrew Ashford Group's offer entirely. Derek's break fee was $40,000, money he didn't have. He sold his truck. He canceled his vacation. He stopped posting on social media. Richard, to his credit, came to see me 2 weeks after the dinner. He sat in my living room, the same living room where Derek had stood and told me I was nothing, and he didn't make excuses. "I should have seen it," he said. "I should have paid attention." "Yes," I said. "You should have." He nodded, accepting it. "What happens now?" "We rebuild," I said. "Slowly. Honestly. If you want to help, you can start by showing up on Monday morning and learning how to bid a job." He showed up. The farmhouse still stands. Mitchell Construction is still running. We're not profitable yet, not really, but we're not bleeding anymore. I quit my job with the city last month. I run the company now. Eleanor comes to the office every Tuesday and Thursday, sits in her grandfather's old chair, and reads the mail. The folding ruler she gave me when I was 12, the one with my grandfather's initials carved into the wood, sits on my desk. I use it sometimes, when I need to remember what I'm building for. Derek asked through my mother whether I'd help him with the break fee. "To keep the peace," she said. I said no. Nicely. Once. The door to Mitchell Construction is open to anyone who wants to work. Derek can come back if he wants to. He can learn the business the way I learned it, by showing up, by measuring twice, by doing the work that nobody else wants to do. But he doesn't get a free pass anymore. None of them do. I spent 32 years being the invisible one. The one who fixed things and never got thanked. The one who carried the weight and got told she was just measuring other people's work. That's over now. My grandmother taught me that a name isn't something you're given. It's something you earn, by what you build, by what you protect, by what you're willing to hold up when everyone else has walked away. That's what I'm doing now. I'm building. I'm protecting. I'm holding up something that matters. And for the first time in my life, I'm not doing it alone. If you've ever been the quiet one who saw the cracks before anyone else, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this story reminded you that sometimes the people who seem the smallest are the only ones holding up the whole structure, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Because the quiet ones? We're the ones who measure before we cut. And when we finally speak, we don't need to raise our voices. The paper already does the talking. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.